You're listening to the Mind Your Business podcast, episode number 46. Today, we're talking all about the essential ingredients for manifesting anything. So, stay tuned. Hi, I'm James Wedmore, and I've built a 7-figure internet business that offers the financial freedom to do what I want, when I want. And I'm the first to say that hard work and hustle are not essential ingredients for your success. So, how do you build a thriving business from the inside out? This is the Mind Your Business podcast, featuring myself and co-host Phoebe Mroczek. All right. Welcome to the show. I'm James Wedmore.
I'm Phoebe Mroczek.
This is the Mind Your Business podcast, and it has been a while since we have talked about the M word, manifesting.
Ooh. This is one of my favorite topics. I love this one.
Well, I love that we can kind of do a whole range of different topics, but I always love to come back to stuff like this. You know, in the first few episodes of the podcast, if you haven't seen those episodes or listened to those episodes yet, we talk about things like the law of attraction, how to manifest and have more abundance in your life. And this was an idea for an episode that I wanted to have. So Phoebe and I sat down and kind of mapped it out. There are some essential ingredients to this whole law of attraction or manifesting, you know, whatever label you want to put it on, but it's really about intentionally creating your reality and the things that you want in your life versus being a victim to it. So, you know, you can look at it through an energetic, a quantum physics, or a woo-woo lens, or you can just look at it as like, listen, it's your life and you get to choose what you put in that life. And either way you look at it, the things I think that we're going to share today are going to be pretty relevant.
Well, before we get into the episode, James, I know you're in the middle of your big launch for the year, the Business by Design. So can we get an update on how that's going?
Yes. Yeah, this is one of 2 promotions we plan on doing for the year, but this is the first of them, so it is a pretty big deal. And it's kind of good to reflect upon this. Like, we're literally right here as we record this episode, smack dab in the middle of it. It's pretty awesome to reflect on it because this is a program and a product that I've been really wanting to release for a long time, or just even create for a long time. And we had a wedding this year and some things that took precedence. And Chelsea and I got married at the end of May and kind of took the next few weeks to relax. And then we're like, all right, are you ready? And we pretty much did everything from scratch in a month. You know, I mean, like, I'm talking create an entire program, the entire launch for it, from sales page, sales videos, and the pre-launch content. I mean, it has been like just birthing a beast.
I was going to say, it's not just like a tiny little product. Like you normally, you know, you have like a couple little small products, video ROI, you know, these little things, but this is a huge.
You know, so there are some things I want to talk about with this just because I think it's relevant, and, you know, I want to turn what I'm about to talk into an episode later, but it kind of needs some more time to percolate. But I think 2 things that are really coming up for me as lessons is the first one is when you get into things like a launch, it's the natural order of things that launches can be, you know, like hectic and crazy. And this has been the most effortless, pain-free launch that we've ever done, ever. Like, it just keeps getting easier and easier. But there's still a lot of demand from me to be creating a lot of content. So I'm like, it takes, as you guys know, as creators, it takes a lot of you to create content, like even like a podcast episode. So it's kind of like a constant daily test of like physical energy to like, okay, do I have it in me to create this? At the end of the day, I kind of just have to come back to a place of reminding myself and trusting myself that it's all going to get done. And that kind of ties into what we're talking about here today with manifesting is I'm manifesting that we get the completion of everything that we said we're going to do, and it's done on time. That you just kind of have to stay in that place of trust. Like, overwhelm comes in when time becomes an issue, right? Like, you have too much to do and not enough time. If you have too much to do but all the time in the world, there's no overwhelm and stress. And so we put these really tight deadlines on us, and I just have to keep coming back to that place of, hey, we're going to get it all done. It's going to happen. And it feels really good when I do that because I've had experiences of that where you're like, somehow it magically gets done. And I remember the last launch actually, when I was kind of starting to feel that I was taking on the burden of a lot of stuff. And I'm like, man, there's just too much on my to-do list. And I kind of made this request to, you know, this is down the woo-woo rabbit hole of like, hey, someone else do this. Like, I just like intentionally in my mind put it out there. And I remember you were helping out on that launch. And I think you called me the next day and you're like, hey, is there anything I can take off your plate?
Yeah. You're like, really? Yes.
Are you serious? And
Yeah.
stuff like that happens. It's always a great reminder to stay in the outcome and the possibility that you're creating versus getting stuck in there's not enough time. You can't create in there, right?
Right. Yeah.
Now, the other thing, and this is something I'm really want to turn into an episode, but we have to start talking about it now, is this experience that I've had of, you hear people talk about stepping into your power and stepping into your purpose. And, it sounds so cliche. And even as a person who wants to talk about all these things in this podcast, I find myself rolling my eyes and saying, oh my goodness, you step into your heart-centered power, blah, 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 and I roll my eyes at that. Okay. Like, we do have to have some practicality in what we're doing, but the experience that I'm really having around this launch is really getting that this is something I've been wanting to do for a long time. And I kept putting it off because I've been the video guy and because I've been teaching video. It's so interesting how the moment I stepped into this, which the launch and the content we have around the launch is really teaching course creators and online influencers how to have a more strategic approach to their business so they're not stuck in this overwhelm and confusion. They have a plan to get the results they want. And the moment I started talking about this, like, it just was like, I don't know, it's like when you put on an outfit and it just fits perfectly and you're like, damn, I look good. And it was that same feeling. Like, I was like, oh, this makes more sense than anything I've ever done. This feels better than anything I've ever done. And I'm really realizing that, like, sometimes we kind of skirt around what we're really meant to do and what we really want to do, and I found for a long time I was kind of skirting this by putting video in front of it because I love video so much. But every time someone comes, anybody who's a customer here of one of my video products, you come into a video program of mine and what am I teaching you? It's like, okay, there's video, but then there's strategy and making you more money. I realized, like, why don't I just talk directly to that? And I think that's kind of what life is like, especially as an entrepreneur, it's like, okay, let's just get to the thing that we really want to help people with right at the core. If we had 20 minutes to sit down with that person, their ideal customer, what would you really cut the crap, no BS? What would you really do with them? How would you really help them? And if someone would ask me if I had only 20 minutes, it would be like, well, yeah, I would give them a strategy for hitting their goal. Now I'm doing that. So the launch itself, the feedback's been amazing. The content came out extraordinarily well, and people are already seeing like really great results. So I'm really happy about it. So
yeah, just, hearing, because I know that this is something that you've wanted to create for a really long time, but it also kind of felt like everything aligned, really easily for you. So maybe if you had done it earlier, sooner. I know so many times people are like, oh, if only I had done that 2 years ago, and so I think that there is a fine line between knowing when it's time to do it and like cutting through the BS that you were saying and actually just getting it done. So I think that like it's all going to come together at the right time.
Yeah, I hear that. But the funny thing is, Phoebe, is that I did have that experience where I'm like, I could have done this way sooner. Why did I wait so long? And it's kind of like that thing, that purpose, whatever, your true calling is not really a calling. It's just sitting there patiently waiting for you.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how I felt, that it wasn't going to come down as like angels with trumpets from the heavens and like scream and sing at me until it gets my attention. It's just going to like quietly sit there and wait for you because like, it's your life and it's all about the choices and decisions that you make. And it would probably just have kept sitting there for the rest of my life until I decide, okay, I'm going to do this. The moment I did it, I'm like, man, why wasn't I doing this like 2 years ago? But it's still like, no, like divine timing. It feels great. It's perfect right now. Having Chelsea on board, having the team that we have on board now, because we've built a team in the office. So communication is there, efficiency, they work their tails off. It's awesome. So yeah, there's just an update on that. We do have an episode on the podcast, which we can link in the show notes to, I think it was a 2-part episode we did on going through a launch, what it takes to pull off a launch, kind of like what to expect mentally, emotionally, and physically going through a launch. Because, I think the last piece of this before we get into today's episode is where I find myself is I want to keep doing more. Like when it keeps working, you're like, okay, how do we maximize this? How do we do better? And at one point you just have to be like, all right, let's just let it do its thing. It's really important to know that a launch isn't a one and done thing. Like this is your one chance to shine. Otherwise you're going to blow it. It's like, no, totally. I know people who launch the same product 4 times a year, and it just gets better every time. So that's what I have to kind of keep reminding myself, that it doesn't have to be perfect. I don't have to, the whole world doesn't have to see it this time. I'm okay with that. So anyway.
So let's get into today's episode. We're talking about the essential ingredients for manifesting. And so when James and I sat down, we really came up with the 3 essential ingredients, which are, first one is expectation, the second one is detachment, and the third one is action.
Yeah.
So kind of dive into them separately, but let's get into manifestation and what that actually is.
Yeah, I think that's important to see if we can first create a distinction for what manifestation or manifesting means. And, we're big fans of the Abraham Hicks crew. We've mentioned them in the past, and they have a great definition that I'm trying to recall word for word, so I'm paraphrasing. But really, manifesting is physical evidence of an existing vibration. And when I first heard them say that phrase, I think things clicked on the deepest level possible. And so what is vibration? Well, if everything is energy, then everything is vibrating. And if we look at us as kind of like a radio tuner or a radio itself, and we have a tuner, we can tune our energy or a vibration to different frequencies. So if you look at a radio, especially an old-fashioned radio where you're literally turning a knob and the little orange bar is going left or right, all those frequencies exist in the same place, right? All those radio stations are coming into the radio at once. All the frequency for 95.5 and 106.7, they're all there. But the radio is able to choose one over the other and exclude the others. And so the way we indicate what our vibration or frequency is through our emotions. That's the crazy thing. It's what are our emotions? Our emotions are simply the GPS or the dial that tells us where you're vibrating at. Isn't that interesting? If you really think about it, it's okay, we have these 5 senses, it's good to have a sense so we can see, we can touch, taste, and feel, but why do we have this thing called emotions? What is that function? And if we sit there and go, wait a second, this is to tell us where we're vibrating at. It's a feedback mechanism. So if my hand touches a stove, I'm using my physical sense, and it's telling me this is hot, right? So you feel pain. Now, the thing is I don't associate myself as pain. I don't then go, I am pain, or I am hot. What my brain does is says, don't touch that thing. That's bad. And I remove my hand. But what happens with our emotions is that something happens, someone close to you, or maybe it's a hater online or whatever, calls you an idiot. They call you stupid, and you feel bad. To me, that is our emotions are doing the same thing. It's trying to say you're focusing on something bad, stop it, right? So I get depressed when someone says, you're stupid. So I have a feeling of negativity. I have this negative feeling, and instead of going, oh, I shouldn't focus on that, I just make an association that says, I am depressed. Right? And so that, to me, I think is a really important distinction. So I'm going to repeat the definition of manifestation again. So manifestation is physical evidence of an existing vibration. So what we need to do, there's 2 pre-steps here before we get into these 3 ingredients. We've defined manifestation, and the ingredients are expectation, detachment, and action. But in order to manifest something intentionally, we have to know really 2 things. First of all, what do you want to manifest, right? So what do you want? And, if you're listening along to this, you might want to start trying this out and be like, well, what are some of the things on my wish list, I remember when my VW bus was something on a wish list that Chelsea and I would throw out there. We would do these exercises on long car rides where we would play this game where we go back and forth asking for whatever we wanted in our lives. And it's really great because you want to see how many times you can go back and forth. And for 30 minutes. And then after 30 minutes, you're racking your brain. Okay, I want an Olympic-sized swimming pool. It's I want a movie theater in my home, and you're just kind of listing out all these things. And so you've got those things that you want immediately. You want those things that you've already started dreaming about. And then there's those things that seem so far-fetched. You might as well start bringing them in a little bit more, okay? So you find out what you want, and then there's a powerful second question which says, how will I feel, or how do I think I'll feel when I have this thing? What is it going to be like to have this thing that I'm manifesting? If you're manifesting a new relationship, what is life going to be like for you when you do that? And so what the whole thing behind manifestation is here, again, physical evidence of an existing vibration. The law of attraction is saying, we'll give you what you want when you decide to tune your frequency to it first, right? So you go, okay, I want a new lover in my life. How will that make me feel? That's going to make me feel alive and loved and connected. Okay, when you feel that now, it's going to come in like Niagara Falls, like just a flood. Okay, that's the theory and concept behind this. So it's feel what you want now. Okay, so hopefully we have that cleared. Is that making sense, Phoebes?
Yeah, totally. And that's something I think is really important when, I don't know, I think that's something I struggled with when I was looking at all these things that I was trying to manifest. I knew what it was, but I didn't have the second piece. And I think those two are really important and have to go hand in hand.
Yeah,
so I'm glad.
Because what people are doing is they're saying, I know what I want to manifest. And every time I think about it, what happens? They actually lower their vibration because they go, ugh, gosh, I don't have this. You know, and I see myself doing that. You know, we're working on manifesting our dream home, and the number one thing I go to whenever I think about it too long, and I have to be really careful of this, is, you know, as an entrepreneur, it gets really tricky to, you know, get pre-approved and get loans and stuff like that. And I'm like, I do not want to deal with the stress. Like, I know friends and people who are in similar industries and businesses as me, and how much stress and stuff they had to go through to get their home. And it's like, we had money, we make more money than someone who just has a job and can have their pay stubs, you know what I mean? And it just, and I'm always look at that and I go, oh, and I have to get out of that, you know, and we have to stop that, because that focusing on what you want and then lowering your vibration isn't going to get you any closer. Okay. So we want to take a closer look now at what we believe are 3 essential ingredients. So if you've done the other work, which is identify what you want, identify how it'll make you feel when you have it, your primary job is just to feel that as much as you can. Physical evidence of an existing vibration. But let's take a look at 3 of these essential ingredients. The first one is expectation. This is the whole concept of trust or act as if. And there's a great quote that I love that says, live your life like the ball's in the cup. But when I tell most people that, they get very confused. So do you know what that means or implies when I say that?
Yeah, it's a golfing reference.
It's a golfing reference, yes. So to me, what that quote really signifies is that your goal is to get the ball in the cup. And what we do is we put a lot of, you know, fear and uncertainty around, you know, what if it won't work? What if it doesn't go as planned? And what if it fails? And what you have to understand is that's the energy you're bringing to the table when you go to manifest. So that's the vibration that you're putting out there. And living life like the ball is in the cup is putting the energy out there and the vibration, tuning the vibration of my success is inevitable, my results are inevitable, what I want is happening, and I'm going to act in accordance with that. I would act in accordance with the way that I've done this a million times, and this is a no-brainer. You know, if you think, I like to use extremes, okay, like real stupid, simplistic examples. You know, if you look at things that you do every day, you don't put a lot of your energy into it. You know, when you're making your morning coffee, you don't sit there and go, well, what if this doesn't work? If you put the same energy and trust into how you make your morning coffee and how it'll turn out into these other things, that's going to be much more effective. I think what we're doing is putting too much into it. We're making it too big of a deal. But what if creating that next thing you want was just like making your morning coffee? It was just like, just how you trust that you're going to wake up tomorrow, the sun's going to come up, it's going to be another day. You know, we don't, for most of us, we don't, you know, think that tomorrow is the end of the world, that there won't be a sunrise tomorrow. And so if we put that same trust and expectation in there, yeah, I think that helps.
Right. So there is a question in my head, because I hear it all the time when people, you know, they talk about acting as if. And so if you were this really, you know, putting it back into business terms, if you were this really successful entrepreneur and you had everything, or you had a really successful launch, being that now, I think a lot of conversations that I've had in the past couple of months have been like, well, yeah, that's easy for you to say because you can, you know, you can afford to pay all these people and you can afford to have all this stuff. But if people are just starting out, how would you recommend that they start to act as if?
Yeah, well, that's the funny thing too, is that, you know, success begets success. And this is a big thing why they always say the rich gets richer and the poor gets poorer. Well, yeah, this is why. Because the more you're doing this, the more the trust, the expectation, the detachment, all these things just builds more and more momentum. The more we stay in the vibration of the result, because we keep getting the result, the more it just comes to us. I mean, my results have skyrocketed over the years, and this is what I directly attribute it to. The first thing I say to anybody who says, well, that's easy for you to say, blah, 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 is this. You can say that to me all day long. You can say that to yourself all day long. but that's not going to solve your problem. That's not going to get you out of it, right? Making a point that, oh, you've got it easier now because you have a team or you've been doing this longer, it doesn't serve you. It actually just puts you back into a victim helplessness state. It does not empower anybody by saying that. And that's the first thing I would say. So you got to stop saying that if you want to get out of that, right? I mean, you could say that your whole life. Well, they're this and they're that, right? But the second piece is that you have to understand that everybody started where you are, or where you think you are, or where you started from as well. Someone asked me during launch, like, well, what if we don't have a list yet? This doesn't work if you don't have a list. Everyone started with no list. What do you think? We were like born and it's like, here, son, I'm giving you my email list. It's time, you know? Like everyone had to start somewhere. And I started with no list. This is why I said like going from 0 to 5 miles an hour, like going from absolute zero inertia to a little bit of movement is like just as much work as going from 5 miles an hour all the way to 60. But you got to get that momentum and you got to accept it's like, hey, it's going to take a little bit of time. I've got 5 people on my email list. I'm doing this all by myself right now and I've only got 3 hours a day because I got a full-time job. That's just where you're at right now. It is what it is. But if you're creating something different, you have to be willing to do something different because what got you here won't get you there. And that's all we can say about that. So going back to this, expectation is really about saying, okay, step number 1, what do I want? Step number 2, how will it make me feel? And then now step number 3 with expectation is asking the question, do I believe that this will happen to me? Do I believe I will get this? And then you can really check in and say, on a scale of 1 to 10, if I'm really being honest with myself, where am I on that? 10 is an absolute, oh, hell yeah, it's coming. 1 is like, not in a million years. Okay? So you want to find where you fall on that, and then your job is just to trust more. And we can help with that if it's low. The biggest way to help, like, so if Phoebe says, I want a mansion in the best area of San Francisco, and I want it by the end of the year. And if I said, where do you believe that you're going to, she's like, well, it's a 2. I don't really, I just don't have a big belief around that. I don't expect that right now. I don't trust that that's going to happen. So I'm going to just say, we have to either do one of 2 things, okay? The first is we might have to just ask for something smaller, right? Like maybe not a mansion, but like maybe just a car right now or something, you know what I mean? And find the thing, because this is a muscle. It's about developing a muscle. When you see that it works, you can start to go bigger. So if something is like an 8 or less, find something smaller. But the other thing is you can soften it a bit, okay? You can sit there and say, well, first off, does it need to be by the end of the year? No, it doesn't. Okay? Year's almost over. It's going to come by really fast. Okay, and then you could say, well, does it really need to be the biggest, most expensive mansion at the best area of San Francisco? Well, yeah, it does. Okay, well, why? Why do you want this? Well, I want it because I want to feel this, and I want to have that, and I want my friends to say this about me, and I want to be the coolest kid in town. Okay, great. So let's just put that out there, right? And that softens it as well. But this is, I think, the first piece. And the second question you want to ask around this, which I think is really important, is more important than just expectation and do I believe this is going to happen, but do I believe that I deserve this?
Right.
Or just do I deserve this? And you really want to check in there on a scale of 1 to 10. Do I deserve this? Now, I'm just, we could have a whole episode on deserving. I'm just going to tell you, you are deserving of it. You are put here on this planet to have whatever you want. And if the desire popped up in your head, you are worthy of it, okay? But that might not be so easy. It's easy for me to say it. It might be hard for you to say it. It might be hard for you to believe that you deserve it. And that's programming. That's our upbringing. That's our culture. That's society. That's a lot. There's a fear that other people are going to judge you because you're better than us now. And it's just funny. Like for me, I feel lucky because I was the poor kid in a very wealthy society. And the thing is if I were in any other school in America, I would have been the wealthy kid. Mm-hmm. So I had an experience of my parents being totally financially fine. But compared to the other kids, I mean, we're talking about some of the wealthiest kids in the nation here. And so every weekend I'm taking Aspen trips, going on the private yacht, and, just these extravagant birthday parties and box seats at all the Lakers games. And that's just how it was. And I was like, how come we can't take kids, my friends to Aspen for a week and stay in our second home. How come we don't have a third home? How come we don't have a private yacht? Even though my parents were financially fine, it was that contrast for me. It was like, wait a second. Look at all this other stuff that people can have. Mm-hmm. I want that stuff, right? That was a huge motivator for me when I was younger.
Right. And I think that I've had similar experiences growing up, but in mine, it was like that then translated into you don't deserve it. Even though, I had a great upbringing and all of that, but in different situations when in soccer teams and stuff like that, it all came back to this voice that was like, well, you just don't deserve it. And so I've done a lot of work in the last, I would say year and a half to kind of uncover and go back to those specific conversations that I had with myself, in those situations or those circumstances. All of a sudden it's like, well, if you can go back to that and kind of rewire it and be like, no, actually tell yourself that everything that you've created from that place of, oh, I don't deserve it, was just something you told yourself in a moment where you weren't educated on how to, that was just something that came up. So that's been really interesting for me to see a bunch of different situations when I told myself that.
Well, another thing is, because I feel like I'm rather smart, so I get to kind of outsmart my, limiting beliefs and insecurities and stuff. And so what I kind of did early on when I realized it is hard to ask for, money and what I'm worth and all that type of stuff, especially when I got started, is I really just created a new story, which said, I want to be, since I want to be of service to others and help others, I want to be the source of their inspiration. Mm-hmm. And logically, I was able to, justify or overcome any insecurities I had about not being worthy or deserving of something. Because I could sit there and say, well, ultimately, I want to inspire someone else to what is possible. So I need this so that I can show, you know what I mean? It became like an act of service in a way.
Yeah.
And that was just kind of my way of convincing myself, oh no, well, maybe I don't deserve this, but I need this because it will show others what's possible. I can't share my message if I'm broke. Right? I can't have the impact I want to have if I don't have the lifestyle that I say is going to come with the coaching action items I give them. And that really helped me for a long time. Okay, so that's expectation. You really want to check in. If you're doing this live with us, you've been following the steps. What do I want? How will it make me feel? What's the emotion, the experience, the feeling, the state that it will give me or that I think it will give me? And then do I believe this on a scale of 1 to 10? Do I believe this is going to happen? And do I deserve this on a scale of 1 to 10? Where are you at with there? If you're not a 9 or a 10, you just play around here. Well, what's going to make it a 9 or a 10? Do I soften it? Do I, make it bigger, make it smaller, give myself more time, blur it a little bit? I always say well, what's the essence of what I want here? It doesn't have to come out perfectly. And that actually takes us to the second ingredient, which is so powerful. This is called detachment. So detachment is simply, I think the best way I can express detachment, I think for me, it's not letting the outcome affect you one way or another. And I think the most important thing is that the result or lack of result or what happens or doesn't happen has nothing to do with how you see yourself. It doesn't affect who you are as a person. It doesn't change your identity. It doesn't make you any different, But one of the things that you want to play around here is you just want to ask the question, especially the more you're in the game with this. If this doesn't work out, what am I going to do? How am I going to react? Right? So I play these games all the time. I think I've mentioned this before. It's kind of like the sick, twisted game I play, but it's just to kind of check in with my level of attachment to something. I've got this beautiful, fully restored 1971 VW bus. And sometimes I find myself getting a little nervous when I park it because it's just so perfect, but it's also very fragile car. And so I say I'll come back from the supermarket and be like, what if someone has just scratched up and destroyed the whole side of my car? And when I see that, I'm really upset. Oh, I'd be so upset. I'd be so freaking out. I'm like, okay, wait a second. Let's just we got to let go of this a little bit. Who the hell cares? It's just a car. And it's not like it's the only car out there. It's not one of 500 made or anything like that. And so that's the first thing for detachment for me is I really start to ask the question, well, what if this doesn't work out? I do this with coaching clients and they're like, I don't know what I'm going to do. There's your first problem. Okay. Now, the second level of detachment is being detached from how it's supposed to look. So first it's be detached from it coming in at all, Like, even if it doesn't, I'm going to be happy. It'll come in when it needs to come in at the right time in the right place. That's attachment. But then also being like, it doesn't have to look the way you think it needs to look. I have a coaching client that put out a goal of wanting to do a $300,000 launch. And she didn't hit the launch. She did about half of that. And I came back and I was like, well, the launch is over when you say it's over. There's always, I have an affirmation that says you're always leaving money on the table. And that's a good thing. So I say, do you want to still hit your goal? Because we can do it. She says, I really do. And I say, and you're completely detached from how that money comes in. She goes, absolutely. And long story short, we won't get into details of it, but she ended up hitting over $300,000 because she just made another offer to another group of people. And it took another week, but she got it. And so we tend to get really fixated on here's how it has to look. I want this new lover in my life, and the way I'm going to find him is on this dating site. And you start going on there and none of it's working. You're frustrated, you're angry because I'm on this damn dating site the whole day, every day. And you realize as you've got your head down looking at this app, Tinder and Bumble, walking through the streets with your head down, and like all these great guys or girls are walking right past you and you're not noticing. That's talking about attachment to the way in which you think it's going to show up. So the analogy we want to give here, the visualization, is if you have what do they call the thing? The sonar screen that you see like in the movies, like Hunt for Red October, where it's the little circle, the green circle, and it goes boop, 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 right? Okay. So we have this sonar screen that's like 3 inches in diameter, and we're looking in those 3 inches for where's the path? Where's the thing I'm manifesting? Where is it? Give me this. And what you want to do is you want to take that 3-inch screen and you want to expand it to like 10 feet, 100 feet, like infinity, and realize that what you want can come in and probably will from the most unlikely of places. That's detachment.
I loved our episode with Kate Northrup, and you guys were both talking about the margin for magic and allowing that kind of wiggle room a little bit in either financial goals or a launch goal or whatever that looks like. And I think that's a really important piece as well, just allowing for that to come in whatever way it's going to. And I think that's really important. It's something that I've actually really struggled with, because I feel like I always know best, and I know how it's going to look, and I know how it's going to be best for me. And it wasn't until I really got to, I think we've had several conversations about the essence of what you want. And once I was able to figure that out and kind of dig a little bit deeper, and I don't necessarily, a lot of the things that you were bringing up in the conversation I thought were really funny, because that, a house in San Francisco, that I would love that. And like a partner, I would love that. And so all of these things are super relevant for me, and knowing that it's not actually as specific and as concrete as I make it in my head. And so getting down to the essence of what you want is really important.
Yeah, definitely. And I love the margin for magic. We've talked about that in another episode with Kate Northrup. It's, okay, I want a goal of $1 million this year, and I've got this product, and it better work. I better make $1 million with this product. Be like, no. Opportunities will fall in your lap that you never realized were possible. We have this all the time, like a great affiliate promotion that we do, and it's like, wow, that did way better than I ever thought it was going to do. Stuff like that happens all the time. So you got to loosen the grip a little bit. So we want to talk really quick about the third ingredient here in manifesting, and that is action. Now, this is truly inspired and prioritized action. That's really what we want to get across here. It's inspired and prioritized action. It's not massive action. You're going to always hear me say, I hate when people say things like, take massive action. No. Now, I don't fault people for saying that, because what they're doing is they're realizing that they get inspired, and they're getting inspired, and they're having this great day where they get all this stuff done that they need to get done. And they go, wow, look at all that massive action I took. And they just say to somebody else, hey, go do the same. Go take massive action. But if someone hasn't done all these prior steps that we've just labeled in this episode, they're just going to get busy. And then they're like, well, I hustled, I did the work, and I took massive action. Why didn't it work? It's because you're just focusing on the wrong things. And so there's a great book. We've recommended it before. It's called The One Thing. And it asks one question that helps you to identify, quality of your life is determined by the quality of questions you ask. Through this question, it helps you identify what is your next required action, right? So the question is like, what is the one thing that you could do right now that by doing it would make everything else easier or, non-essential? What's that one thing I could do right now? What's the next thing I could do? And you should always be asking that. Now, the other piece, we really wanted to include action here because When movies like The Secret popularized things like law of attraction and manifesting, they really painted a picture of it just sitting in a room with the doors locked, being a hermit. You close your eyes, think of the red bicycle, and knock on the door, and there's a red bicycle at the door. Now, I do believe that stuff can absolutely happen. But the stuff that you're really up to doing will take some action. And so there's a great story. I don't know if you guys have heard it. I don't know if you've heard it, Phoebe, and I'm going to give the very short version of it, where there's a small town that's flooding really badly. Like a dam broke in the town and it's flooding. And there's the preacher at the top of a church. He's standing on the roof and someone comes by in a boat and says, "Father, can I help you?" And he says, No, that's okay. I'm waiting for God to save me. I've, sent a prayer out to him. He's going to save me. And then, someone else comes by on a bigger boat, and then someone comes by in a helicopter. And every time he says, No, I'm good. And he ends up not being able to get off the roof because he's waiting for God to save him. And of course, he drowns and dies. And when he goes up to heaven, he asks God, he goes, "Why didn't you never come to save me? I mean, I've served you my whole life." And he says, "What are you talking about? I sent a guy in a boat. I sent a guy in a bigger boat. I sent a guy in a helicopter." And for me, I love that story because, I think, yes, we're waiting for signs. We're waiting for all this stuff these miracles to happen. And what if we just realize that everything that is happening in your life is a miracle? They show up in the most common and everyday place, but you still have to be willing to take that action to say, yes, I'll go. I think that's a very fascinating viewpoint to take on, to say that the advice you need, the lesson you need, the motivation or inspiration you need can come in the most unlikely of places, from the unlikely of people. But we're looking for the man in the beard to part the clouds. It brings in a whole nother conversation. If we're all of the same creation, then yeah, of course it's going to show up in the most, like a stranger bumping into you and all of a sudden you're talking about something like, wow, I was just thinking of manifesting that. That stuff happens if you allow it and invite it in your life. That's what we call synchronicity. But all three of these ingredients need to happen if you want to create a miracle in your life. To me, a manifestation is truly something that this is about something you didn't think you could really do, because you can manifest like getting lunch right now, right? Those are the easy things. This is about the things that, man, if I do this is kind of a miracle in my life because I didn't really think this was possible. I've never been able to do this before. It's not like, oh, I'm going to manifest a burger because I'm starving. Here, I'm just going to call up the local burger joint. Yeah, well, yeah, it's still, you could call that manifesting, right? You expected it, you're detached from it. You're like, well, whatever burger place, and then you took action. But this really comes into play when you're doing the things that are bigger than, what you've ever thought possible before.
So I hope you enjoyed that episode. I just wanted to quickly recap the essential ingredients for manifesting. So we talked about expectation, living life as if the ball is already in the cup. And then we talked about detachment. So removing any idea of what you think the outcome should be, and then taking inspired action.
That's it. Pretty simple there. Thank you guys so much for listening, for tuning in. Make sure to subscribe to us on iTunes if you haven't already. We've got so many more episodes coming your way. You can just head on over to www.jameswedmore.com/iTunes, or you can open up the podcast app and do a quick old search for Mind Your Business, and you'll find us over there. Thank you so much for listening. We'll see you on the next episode.